Welcome to a brand new show with me, Anthony Davis, and him, Michael Popok. We bring you Global AF, where we take an international look at the effects of the Trump presidency. And Michael, I thought we'd start with, really the big news out of the White House, and that is that Donald Trump is imposing these insane tariffs on Canada and Mexico, new duties that will effectively, and some people are actually saying, we should start right up here with the jeopardy. Some people are saying this could crash the global economy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're going to focus on at Global AF is sort of the two sides of the coin, right? We're going to talk about how the global community, country by country, is going to react to Donald Trump and retaliate against Donald Trump. And who is the victim of that? It's going to not because of the global community, because of Donald Trump. It's going to be the American people. Yeah. Donald Trump. You would think after watching the first 12 days, Anthony, that this man has never been the president of the United States before. I mean, honestly, they spent a lot of time and a lot of ink talking about 45 and 47, 45 and 47. Seriously, you would think this guy just wandered in from who knows where, and has been given. It's one of those movies where the guy that does the lawn ends up being, the president for a week or two.
Chauncey Gardner.
Gardner, right, is taking over. It is bizarre. And what
we're watching, this the proof that there are no adults in the room in this presidency, and how much we relied on the adults in the room in the first presidency, where initially he didn't really know what he was doing, so he was taking advice from military generals and people who were kind of career civil servants. But he kind of realized between that presidency and this one that if he gets rid of all those people, there is going to be nobody to tell him no. And a narcissist does not like to hear the N-word.
And the problem in the first 12 days is that I said that normally when you implement such far-reaching policy, economic policy, simultaneously, where in the domestic arena, for instance, here in the U.S., same week, same 3-day period, he decided to take the U.S. out of the U.S. economy, not recognizing, right? Yeah. Not recognizing the role of the U.S. government in funding federal programs, even down to the state level, and how it makes the economy of the United States hum. So he wants to sideline the U.S. from its own economy. At the same time, he runs underground by chasing them through churches and schools, undocumented, who, whether you like it or not, are law-abiding undocumented who do the dirty jobs in America and pay $65 billion in tax. Yeah. They've gone underground, which has reduced the ability in our recovery efforts in all the states that have been hit with natural disasters, and segments like construction and our food logistics and supply, all impacted severely by the deportation raids. And then he looked around and said, "What haven't I destroyed? Oh, I get it. The foreign side of our economy. Let's go after our top 2 trading partners with a false narrative about a trade deficit being a bad thing, as opposed to the trillions of dollars of debt and tax cuts being the bad thing. And while we're at it, let me do a solid for the Chinese, who are going to get a better tariff tax base than our allies." Wait till we dive in. I want to hear from you what you think. Of course, what you think Canada, Mexico, Trudeau and the incoming group, Claudia Sheinbaum, and the rest of the world is going to do now that Donald Trump has pulled the trigger on tariffs.
Well, the irony here is that he's chosen 2 countries that we share a land border with. So you could understand if he wanted to start further away. But he's chosen our 2 closest trading partners, our 2 allies, military allies, cultural allies, even as far as, people traveling back and forth. It's not just people seeking asylum that cross the border. Millions of people cross the border every year, both north and south. And he doesn't seem to really think about that side of it either. I think Trudeau took a bit of a pounding, didn't he, when he first went down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, and then the media kind of went for him. And even though he's on the way out, I think he learned his lesson. And he's now kind of having to change the story a little bit. He's certainly kind of giving the impression, just from what he said.
He's more dangerous on the way out than he was before.
Exactly
to Trump.
Yeah. But maybe we could just circle back for a second, because you and I were chatting just before we started the show, and I want to make the point that none of this stuff, any of these executive orders, any of this stuff, is necessary. This is all performative. This is all for Trump to look like a strongman. It has no effect on the U.S. economy. What this fight with these countries is not, if he didn't bother, if he'd have just left it and said, you guys, I'm good with you guys, then we would have prospered and continued to prosper. This is all for one man to feel like he's doing something, because he's not an economist. He doesn't understand about international trade. He doesn't understand about the global community. So he just chooses to pick fights with people like he's a kind of mafia boss. And that is him asserting, he's flexing his muscles, he's asserting his authority, and in the process, he's going to crash the U.S. economy. And as we know, America sneezes, the world catches a cold.
Yeah, this is the playbook from Donald Trump. Create a false narrative of something that's not really going on to create a ridiculous policy to crush a non-existent problem, whether it's a critical race theory being taught to kindergartners when it's a college level or law school level class,
or DEI in the
DEI
traffic
causing
control.
70 victims to be floating in the Potomac.
Yeah.
When it had more to do with his budget cuts and the failure to have proper staffing that night, watching helicopters and airplanes in the airspace. And here's the other false narrative, which is we have a Canadian trade deficit problem, or that we're subsidizing Canada by the tune of $200 billion. I'll give you an example just to show what I'm talking about, and then we'll turn to Canada and Mexico. It would be as if Donald Trump woke up tomorrow and said, I am going to put an end to Peruvians infiltrating Major League Baseball. There are Peruvians that are infiltrating Major League Baseball, and I will be passing an executive order tomorrow to address this. Okay, there are no Peruvians that are infiltrating Major League Baseball, but it does give him an excuse to issue an executive order. That there is no real trade deficit in between Canada and U.S. There's a $1 trillion trade relationship, and there is an infinitesimal, in the grand scheme of things, current deficit of about $48 billion, which in $1 trillion of trade is almost nothing. It's almost a rounding error. And it's only because the things that Canada sells our economy in the US are the things that we need in order to have a GDP. It's used by our manufacturing sector to make our products. That's how fundamental the Canadian supply chain is to the United States. Whether you call it energy, power, minerals, elements, it goes into what we build to export. So that's the last place. Our number one trading partner for electricity on the way in, Donald Trump instead told the American people at Davos in Switzerland during the economic conference and recently that we don't need Canada's trees. We have our own trees. This isn't about trees.
Well, that's all he's got to go on. He watches a documentary like he did on the Panama Canal, and then he takes a whole position. Let me quote him, though, because on Thursday he said, we'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons. Number one is that the people that have poured into our country so horribly and so much. Okay, let's not get into the grammar of that.
Canada?
Number two are the drugs, fentanyl, and everything else that has come into the country. And number three are the massive subsidies that we're giving to Canada and to Mexico in the form of deficits, right? So
fentanyl, there were 50 interactions between the Border Patrol and people drug smuggling out of Canada compared to about 5,000 down in Mexico.
Yeah. So the point that I'm making here by quoting him is to say that this is basically built on a lie. The whole thing is built on a lie. And I don't want the American people and the international community to think that this is based in fact. It is just his fantasy. This whole thing is his fantasy.
Look, he's not the first president to use a lie to start something. I mean,
right.
we had a phony torpedoing of a ship that led to a war. So, I mean, it's happened before.
Well, there's also weapons of mass destruction and all that.
In order to go and level the wrong country.
Right.
But here we are able to hear on independent media with analysis in real time. Fact check him. That's why we want people, of course, here on Global AF, because we could do for them. Or as one of my contributors on Legal AF said recently that I loved, we have to speak truth to each other before we can speak truth to power. And that's what I hope people will come here for. But before we move to Mexico, which is totally going to crater our auto manufacturing capacity, because many of the parts are manufactured in Canada. Cars are assembled in Canada, except for Tesla, who has Chinese-only plants. And then we'll talk about why China got hit with a favored nation status of a 10% tariff instead of the 25% for people that we consider to be our allies.
Well, let's just say that Canada is trying to placate Donald Trump, right? So they're actually saying that they're seeking a resolution, hopefully by Saturday. I think the public safety minister there said, I remain
What is
hopeful.
the resolution? What is the Chinese resolution?
Well, they've already committed, because this is the thing, you have to prove to Trump what you've done, because he doesn't know anything about anything, right? So you literally have to show him flashcards and say, look, man,
Trees.
Person, TV, camera, right? So apparently they've agreed to spend 1.3 billion Canadian dollars on new measures, including, ironically, the use of 2 Black Hawk helicopters and 60 drones along the Canadian border. Yeah, along the Canadian border.
Wait, $1 billion? How much?
1.3 billion Canadian dollars.
That's it? For the 25%? That's the trade?
That's it. And,
all right.
And
what's China going to do?
Well, exactly. And so, Donald Trump, I think, just wants to feel like he's won the deal, because to him, it's all about the art of the deal. And we've seen this, haven't we? He did it with Colombia the other day, right? When he was trying to get those 2 military planes to land in Colombia, and the Colombians like, we ain't taking it. And he's like, I'm going to put tariffs on you. And they were like, okay, we'll take your planes. He sees that as a win, even though that transaction only lasted for about 12 hours.
Well, okay, so let's talk about China for a minute. Let's leave. I think Mexico's in very, very capable hands with Claudia Sheinbaum.
I agree. Yeah,
in her background, her educational background, she cut her teeth on the hard knock politics of Mexico. I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about us in the war with her, not the other way around. But let's go to China for a minute. You think does our world audience really think that China, let's say they cut a deal of a couple of million dollars here and there. They just ate Donald Trump's lunch earlier in the week with the announcement of Deep 6 AI, which they did with tissue paper and chewing gum, $6 million, low-grade chips. They created an artificial intelligence technology. Okay, that is as good or better than any of what's being produced in the United States for like 1/100th of the cents on the dollar. And they announced it just days after Stargate was announced by Donald Trump, which will cost $500 billion. And the world economy, since we're talking global AF here, took a look at that and instantly shed $1 trillion from technology companies on the public market, giving the win to China. Do you think they really give a rat's ass now about a trade war with the United? How do you have a trade war with somebody where the United States is left punching up at China?
I don't think Donald Trump understands that it's possible to have this kind of duality with nations. Now, look, our beef with China is about their human rights and the way they treat their workers and the fact that they, operate a kind of a dictatorship of sorts, right? Kind of communist dictatorship. And, we have our diplomatic channels for that. But alongside that, this is where the duality comes in, is that you can be trade partners. And I don't think Donald Trump understands this because he's so binary. And the nature of, even, when he talks about, buy American, made in America, America, America. I mean, even Boeing had to buy half the parts for the 787 from China to build that plane in America. And so, you could argue that it's the same for dishwashers and washing machines.
All right? I know is 2 American aircraft just collided over the Potomac. Right.
And so
Trump, right?
Trump's kind of xenophobic view of the world, it's not compatible with international trade. And so that's where we're going to find ourselves at loggerheads all the time, is that it is possible to do both. And I believe America needs China way more than China needs America.
Well, that's a good segue into our second topic for Global AF today, which
Yeah.
is going to be how we, as Americans, need the global intelligence community to cooperate with us in order to keep America safe. And you're going to do it from the global perspective about what do your global, I count myself as a global citizen, but what are the global citizens that you lead and that you represent? How do they see the Kash Patel and the Tulsi Gabbards of the world and even the Pete Hegseths of the world being our frontline negotiators and keepers of the American flame when it comes to intelligence?
Well, the thing is, these people, as I see it, are enemies of the state. That they are probably the last people that you would ever put into senior positions for not just national intelligence, but for global intelligence. And we've spoken before about Five Eyes and the way that about the way data is shared and intelligence is shared.
Tell our audience about Five Eyes. I don't want to use so much shorthand. What's the Five Eyes?
Well, it's basically the countries that are bought in to sharing their intelligence. They're at a very senior level. And so I can't remember exactly which the countries are, but I know the UK is
Canada. It's Canada, Australia,
Italy,
UK.
Yeah, we can probably work it out, can't we? It's not that difficult.
I'll spot you three. Okay. Canada, UK, and Australia.
Right. But the point is that, these countries have very high level intelligence gathering capabilities. And so it is much more useful to share that rather than to, see each other as rivals in that way. And that is what has kept us safe. I mean, America has seen a peacetime since 1945, bar 9/11. But that is the reason for that is because of this intelligence sharing and the fact that the people that are in senior positions running the Department of Defense and certainly in Tulsi Gabbard's potential position are trustworthy and they are committed to America and the Constitution and the safety of the international and global communities. And these new candidates, they are not that.
They're not good.
They're cut from a different cloth.
And to put it into plain speak for a minute,
yeah,
our allies are not going to share intelligence with people that they can't trust.
No,
Donald Trump, they can't trust. He would never get a top secret security clearance if he wasn't elected president, right? He wouldn't get a job as a dog catcher if he wasn't elected president. They're not going to trust Tulsi Gabbard, who people have always suspected is a Russian asset. She's got a lot of explaining to do about her relationship with Syria before it fell. And that's not the only place. She's just wholly obscenely unqualified to be an intelligence director where 18 different intelligence agencies report to her. Technically, she's above the CIA, but thank God John Ratcliffe is the head of the CIA because at least if he's going to be the spook master of America, I have a little bit more confidence in him. Kash Patel, 44-year-old former low-grade lawyer who never served in the intelligence community before, who's a loyalist to Donald Trump, and Pete Hegseth, who spent 13 years in hair and makeup on Fox and Friends. I mean, this is not who our allies want to cooperate with. And here, to prove your point, there's that old line, I'm going to get it wrong, but I'm going to paraphrase it. The old line about the devil, the greatest trick of the devil is to make the world believe he doesn't exist. One of the greatest tricks of Donald Trump and MAGA is to make the world believe that we are safer as a country because of the erratic performance of one Donald Trump, and which allows him to undermine the importance of diplomacy, of NATO, of intelligence gathering and sharing around the world. That is a falsehood. The reality is the reason we were safe during the Biden administration. I know people like to point to the world is on fire. Hamas attacked Israel. Putin, once again, violated somebody's sovereignty.
Right.
That's going to happen. By the way, that's going to happen every 5 years with Putin. Doesn't matter who's in office. And Israel has been aflame, and I'm a supporter of Israel, has been aflame since 1944, 1945. Okay, so, but what your point is, America, as we define it and our interest, has not had boots on the ground in a war for a long, long time. And even that, right? So we need diplomacy, we need NATO, and we need intelligence gathering to cooperate with us. And all those things are going to be totally destroyed. I don't know about the next 12 days, but certainly by the first quarter of the Trump administration.
I mean, we declassified information in order to, when Russia invaded Ukraine, so that other countries could join the coalition to try and give Ukraine the support that it needed as a sovereign nation. that is an example of where this intelligence is of use, and by sharing it and declassifying it, it becomes a tool to strengthen international relations. And Trump's isolationist view of the world,
right,
and this America First thing, it is not just xenophobic, but it's a false economy, because it'll come back to bite us.
We get information from we had gotten information from the intelligence community around the world that has helped us stop terrorism, that help us stop Christmas market attacks in the United States. I mean, you're never going to stop, unfortunately, this new version of mass killing, which is you rent a U-Haul and run it through 3 blocks until you're finally stopped to commit suicide and kill as many people along the way as you can, like we just saw on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. But we're talking about mass casualty events the size of 9/11 or wars, and that hasn't happened in this country. And it's not just because believe me, if I would not sleep at night if I thought it was just because it was just accidental. It's because of hardworking career diplomats and career intelligence officers that Donald Trump is busy not only undermining, but drumming out of the administration and out of these positions. People don't want to work for Donald Trump. They are resigning their high offices. We're seeing a decapitation of leadership, both by Donald Trump's hand and by resignations, because people don't want to be in the administration. I want the career people to stay in to defend our Constitution as much as possible. But I fear that we are much more insecure today than we ever were before November 5th.
Well, he's making us think that expertise is the deep state. Mm-hmm. And expertise is something that I crave. I don't want people who are inexperienced running these departments. And everybody that he's chosen, I mean, it was ironic when he was doing that press conference after the crash, and he was saying, we need the best people, the best and the brightest. Meanwhile, he's got Pete Hegseth standing next to him, and, he's literally, and he also isn't up to standard himself as a person. It's this Dunning-Kruger syndrome where he thinks he's an expert on everything and anything, and it's simply not good enough. No. It's not good enough for you or for me or for anybody living in the United States to have chances trying to run a country on their own terms and pushing out all of the experts. It's just too much risk.
Yeah. And you and I both get a lot of communication from our global audiences, our respective global audiences, and there's a fair amount of overlap about it. And they are understandably concerned about a Donald Trump presidency and what it could do irreparably to the world. I mean, we were able to fix a lot of it in the 4 years of the Biden administration. It would have been a lot better had we had 4 more years. But now we're careening from constitutional and abusive power crisis to another on a daily basis. As I joked in one of my recent hot takes, we're averaging 1 lawsuit a day. We're now up to 3 temporary restraining orders already entered in the first 12 days. I think it is going to actually be 2 a day for lawsuits from now until the end of his administration. And what it's doing to I want you to comment on this. What is it doing to the American brand of democracy? The fact that Donald Trump is supposed to be the leader of the free world. Are we making any new democracies in the world? Are we supporting any existing democracies with this brand of democracy? Right? Or are we helping our terrorist adversaries, right, fundraise, recruit, and people watching an erratic president? I mean, come on. Let's be frank. Vladimir Putin, watching the first 12 days of the Trump administration, has to be rubbing his hands in glee about the Achilles heel that he's determined, where there's an executive missing from the executive function of this country. And my fear is, as you know, from history, you're a little bit older than me, but you know. What is it? What happened? Wait, we lost it? Stays in the pod. All right. Okay. Every president is tested at the beginning of their administration by natural disaster, national disaster, terrorist attack, or war, or all 4. We've already seen one with 70 people who lost their lives in an in an aircraft accident, and how he responded to that. Did anybody think that was a master stroke in being the consoler in chief? But our enemies are watching, and our allies are rolling their eyes about I mean, I just saw a report that he got off the phone call with the UK and they were literally laughing about his phone call. He went to Davos by video, the World Economic Conference, and they were gasping in the room with his attack on Canada during the Davos conference.
He doesn't, because of his, he's mentally ill, right? And, it's a podcast for another day, and I've done plenty of them.
Yeah.
But because he does not have the things that we take for granted, like empathy and a conscience, he just doesn't have those things. He does not possess those. And so he drops these kind of chaos bombs around the world. And it reminded me, when he was doing that preposterous press conference, it reminded me of his 2020 stupidity when he started boasting about the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And he was like, we got Soleimani. And the way that he presented that, because it probably should have been, done under the radar, but he was so desperate to boast about it that it caused so much chaos among the Iranian military. It led to them to accidentally shoot down a Ukrainian passenger jet,
right,
killing 176 innocent people because they thought it was an American cruise missile, because they were on high alert because Donald Trump was being nuts.
Yeah.
And this is the consequential effect of having somebody who is so erratic in a leadership position that, we like to know that we are safe. Well, so do other countries, so do other leaders. They like to know that everyone's got each other's backs and that the world order can, even though it's turbulent, can find its equilibrium. And he has just turned that on its head.
Erratic is not a foreign policy. Erratic is not a national security policy. Yes. And I've heard people tell me this, because they think it's funny. I think we're safer now because the world doesn't know what he's about to do. That makes you insecure, not secure. Yeah. And you just proved the point with the victims of a missile shooting, of a plane, because they were made jittery by Donald Trump. He's making the financial markets jittery, and that's always a bad thing. He's making our intelligence community jittery and quit. He's making our global intelligence community jittery. He's making our world economy jittery. And none of this is a good thing. Let me just say one last thing as we wrap. We are less than 2 years from the midterm elections. People wrote me recently and said, what about impeachment? I said, what about showing up, not that particular person, what about showing up to vote at the midterms and give me the House and the Senate? You give me the House and the Senate, and I'll give you an impeachment and a conviction. But I don't want to, hear, not our audience is great. I'm talking about outsiders. I don't want to hear this argument, the kind of the drive-by critics who say some version of, I didn't vote for him, or he's invalid, or he shouldn't have been seated because he's an insurrectionist. Okay, that's great. I don't disagree with you on that, but I also don't trade in magical thinking. And so right now, the best use of our time is to speak truth to each other, right? Is to expose him for the dangerous charlatan that he is, and mobilize the vote for the midterms. That's going to be my bumper sticker. Give me the House and the Senate, and I will give you a conviction and a removal of Donald Trump before he can do even more damage.
I think it's the only way to go. I hope that we have midterm elections. All I would suggest is that if you're not registered to vote, or if you feel that your vote has been purged, because there was an awful lot of voter suppression in the last election, that you make every effort to make sure that you are a registered voter, so that you can, and start now, so that you can use that in 2 years' time.
Absolutely. Anthony, this was we talked a lot about doing Global AF. We did a sort of a version of it when you and I took over the Meidas brothers, when there were some issues going on there in California. We stepped in at the last minute. But this is a first in a series of hot takes we're going to do to sort of soft launch Global AF, the podcast. We're so pleased that our audience is here for us. Everybody loves you, barely tolerates me, but they love us together.
Well, I love you, and that's all that really matters.
That's what matters.
That's what matters. Yeah,
but we're humbled by the outpouring of support for MeidasTouch, for Global AF, for the independent work of Anthony, and for myself, my new channel. You'll plug yours next. My new channel, Legal AF MTN, in collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network. We're at 440,000 after today in just 4 months' time. We're moving on our march to 500,000 by our half birthday. We can only do it with you and your support. Come on over there and support that pro-democracy channel and all things that Anthony does.
Well, I'm
Where
on
are you?
five.
You got
I'm
a
on
channel. Go ahead.
Well, I've got 5-minute news, and everybody hopefully knows about that. And again, come there and join and subscribe and all the usual stuff. And we continue, because we've discovered that independent journalism seems to be really the only place, because we've, corporate media has kind of failed us in this last season. So really, season 2 is all about independence.
Yeah, and thanks for joining. We'll see everybody on the next Global AF Hot Take.